Dr. Gerry Breshears,
That's
thank
me.
you so much
Yeah.
for joining us. I'm very grateful to have the chance to be able to sit down with you. You've been a mentor of my wife for a while as someone who has sat in your classes, and I've actually had the privilege of hearing some of those lectures myself, and I thought I really wanted
Did you
to get...
pay for those?
No, I didn't.
Oh my
because
gosh!
One of the
Thief!
things, I know, but one of the things I love about you is that as such a teacher, you've produced so much great content over the years. Anyway, we've got so much to talk about. So let's just get started with, tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to faith, and what it is that occupies a lot of your time here at Western Seminary.
Well, I was raised in a Christian home, so my first Sunday on earth was spent in church. My background is Brethren, Central Missouri, 60 miles north of Springfield, is Breshears Valley. And so I just grew up as a Christian, and it was just part of my life. At 14, precocious high school student, I read the verse in King James, "Prove all things, hold fast that is good." I was in geometry class. I loved proving things. I went to my church and said, "Prove all things. I got a couple things I want to ask you about." And what they told me in effect was, nice Christian boys don't ask questions like that.
Oh.
And that was it. I was done. Punt. And I rejected Christianity. I thought I was actually rejecting fundamentalism, but I didn't know the difference. So the next 4.5 years, I was looking for a worldview and did firsthand research in a lot of different religions. Such ended up with Ayn Rand.
Oh, sure.
Virtue of Selfishness, Atlas Shrugged. You get what you earn, and you need to earn what you get. Altruism, having other people depend on you or giving to other people is a sin. Be responsible for yourself. And she's had quite a revival, especially on the Republican side of politics, with the libertarian stuff, but total atheist, and made total sense to me, and it led me to despair and to the brink of suicide, because I realized I'm not up to the God job description.
Oh, sure. If it's all on me to make things right, then I'm insufficient to the task.
And I can't.
Yeah.
And just, so I was in despair. I was doing negative evangelism. I was talking to other college students out of high school and college students. I talk them out of their faith in the church.
Oh, man.
And then we changed pastors, and his daughter, Kathy Thompson Kroll, now, I tried my questions on her, and instead of eek and running away, she engaged, hooked me up with her dad, Dick Thompson, who hooked me up with C.S. Lewis. And I said, man, I don't know if I agree with his answer, but this guy is brilliant.
Interesting.
Where there's a nice Christian boy to ask, he brilliantly wrestling in mere Christianity. So I took another series, went back to the foundational documents, which is my way of doing things, read the Gospels, and in effect said, this Jesus is incredible. Why in the world didn't somebody introduce me to him? Because I'd had doctrinal preaching and fundamentalist legalism and such, and Jesus was moral stories we looked at occasionally. Instead of looking at the biography of this man, I mean, it was just, now, a lot of me, arrogant kid to be sure, a life at transforming. And I made a deep, deep commitment to Jesus in my 2-seater sports car on Rio Grande Boulevard in Albuquerque, and as a somewhere between my sophomore and junior year of college.
I'm really curious about how that story pulls through towards the present, but one thing that you've just mentioned there was how you were repelled by maybe, I don't want to say anti-intellectualism, but an inability to face difficult arguments.
Exactly.
And how that kind of winsome, and C.S. Lewis is such a classic example of somebody who is both an effective apologist. Tell us a little bit about kind of your thinking in how that translates into doing evangelism or I don't know if defending the faith is the right word, but
it is.
The method by which we approach that, because there are obviously those questions are still being asked. And so what do you see as being effective in that area?
The first thing I want to do is create a climate where people are encouraged to ask questions. Yeah. And I don't even say honest questions, because a lot of questions are dishonest. They're trying to find a reason why this is wrong. That's not an honest question. Okay, let's engage it.
Yes.
And I want to create a climate where people can ask their questions in all authenticity and engage them, because I'm absolutely convinced that Jesus is the best answer to the deepest questions of life. Not without difficulties. So my thing is find the answer that account for the most difficulty most data with fewest difficulties, and I want to look at the problems. So I want to deconstruct the secular vision, for example, and not just deconstruct the Christian vision.
Yeah.
But let's see which one accounts for all the questions.
Yes.
And I think Jesus will come out with the best answer.
I think that's beautiful. I find I've been I was actually just preaching this last Sunday on the issue of the role of women in leadership ministry, which is an issue in which there are multiple sides to the position, right? and knowing that there would be people on both sides of that issue in the congregation.
More than two. Yeah.
Yes. I said, my objective here isn't to convince you to leave your camp because you've come to those things, and we all have vested interests in being right because we're us, right?
Sure.
And I said, I wonder if the higher objective here isn't to win the argument, but to get invited back to the conversation.
Yep.
So that there's a sense of continuity and graciousness in the conversation, such that the ideas can begin to transfer, as opposed
dignity, respect are critically important.
Yes.
And one of the things I want to do is find out what do we all agree on, because we often go to what we disagree and start fighting with each other. And one of the early things I did when I came here was get together with a group of people who called ourselves the Rogue Fellowship, because we met on the Rogue River at Ray Stedman's house.
Ah, sure.
And we had all the way from fundamentalist to wild-eyed Pentecostal, and everything in between. There were a dozen of us routinely there. But the founding thing was, let's find all the stuff we agree is right, all the stuff we agree is wrong, and let's not talk about the things we know we disagree on. It was a fabulous thing. And I was stunned how much we actually agreed on in controversial issues.
Fascinating.
So like women in leadership, that's where I began. Okay, what do we agree on?
Sure.
Let's talk about that and what we agree is wrong, and let's get those laid foundationally.
Yes.
And that's our foundation. Then come back and say, should a woman be an elder or not?
Yes.
Knowing that we agree that women are fully human, fully image of God, have voices, capabilities, all those kinds of things. Okay, we agree on that. Keep reminding us, okay, we agree with that. We agree that's wrong, that women are somehow second-class citizens or something. You'd wear head coverings, don't you, Courtney? Yeah, all the time. Yeah, just to prove that. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. There's so much there, but I'm so grateful to hear that emphasis on the dignity and and not being fearful of the conversation, but rather invoking it, because if the end of that honest curiosity and that intellectual rigor will lead us towards, we want to know, we want to follow where the data is leading us, if you will.
And for me, I'm absolutely convinced that if I'm wrong, I want to chuck Christianity. And I don't think it's going to happen. I've been doing this for a long time. But still, to this day, if Christianity is wrong, I'm out.
And I think that's an important presupposition to having an honest intellectual argument.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When I sit down and talk to somebody who's Muslim or Mormon or whatever, secularist, I think they're wrong in the way they put things together. But I need to say, if I'm serious about you maybe changing, I need to be serious about changing. Where does the data lead? And we won't agree on things probably, but let's be honest to the data as best we can.
Okay. So from the back seat of a sports car in Albuquerque now...
Front seat. There are only two
Excuse
seats.
me.
Yeah. And I was by myself.
So in the front seat of a sports car in Albuquerque, forward now to here for many years at Western Seminary in Portland, Oregon.
Ridiculous. Came here in 1980.
In 1980. So coming up on nearly 40 years.
Yeah. Next year will be my 40th year here, which is ridiculous. But here I am.
Wow. And over that time, give us a sense for the kinds of projects that you've pursued, the courses you've taught, the areas of interest where you're...
I have always had a heart for broken and hurting people. Back when I was a kid in a one-room schoolhouse in Missouri, when I was in junior higher in Albuquerque and high schooler, I've always had a heart for the worthless person. And it's just the way I'm wired.
Yeah.
So that's always been an interest. So my first year of teaching was a math teacher in suburban Denver, west side of Denver. I had the general math classes. Part of it was male first-year teachers, so I got the worst kids in class, and they were bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I had, in that first year, I had every crime except murder done by my students. I didn't have anybody murder. I had attempted murder.
Wow.
By ninth graders. I mean, that's who I was working with. And I connected in deeply with those kids. And then went to Faith Academy in the Philippines for 3 years. And same thing, I was working with, just got a heart for people. So I came here. I'd done my seminary at Denver. They were just starting a counseling program there. I was very interested in that integration.
Mm-hmm.
I did my doctoral work at Fuller. They have the Fuller School of Psychology there. I got to know several of the psychology students really well, taught at Biola. They had Rosemead School of Psychology there, connected with several of the profs and students there. Came here in 1980. We had our psychology program, which now is at George Fox.
Mm-hmm.
That started here at Western. Connected in deeply with some of the profs and students. Still very close friends with a number of those. And now we've got our licensed professional clinical counseling program. And I teach in the program, and many of the students are close friends, and I've still got that heart for hurting and broken people.
I'm so fascinated with that. So all of that experience that you've done, where you've existed at this intersection of doctrine and theology,
Yep.
and then the care for the broken and hurting
Yep.
people. People are drawn to pastoral ministry
Mm-hmm.
for many reasons, but
Yeah.
one of them is that we tend to be people who have high conscientiousness. We really want
Yes.
to care for other people.
Or I want to be famous for exegeting Greek verbs from the pulpit.
It's true. It's true. Yes, because everybody. That's what really makes people come alive.
Totally.
Yes. But stepping into conversations where people are broken and hurting,
Yep.
is fearful. It's vulnerable. It's scary. There's a sense of you don't want to make things worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So
Really early on, I learned, do not open that up unless you're willing to put it back together. You cannot send them out bleeding and broken. You just can't.
That's interesting. Okay, so kind of let's keep going down that pathway. What are some things, maybe instead of, I'm interested in hearing kind of what do you consider to be some kind of, if I had 60 seconds in an elevator here, do this.
Yep.
But what are some things that you've observed of easy ways for people with good intentions to end up doing harmful things when it comes to caring for people who are hurting?
The most harmful thing you can do is have a formula that says this is the way you deal with that problem.
Oh.
So a current well-known example is CCEF, Christian whatever the Educational Foundation, which is Tim Keller connects with that.
Sure.
Everything is about an idolatry. You have something that's your false god. You put it in the God space. So that's your problem, is find your false god, take it out, put Yahweh there, and it'll solve your problems. Now, for many people, that's true.
Sure.
There is an idolatry. But for many people, that's not their problem at all. So if I come with that formula, which is a simplistic pastoral counseling model, and it's widely done because CCF is a really good organization as far as they go. But you bring that into somebody who's dealing with significant depression, there's no idolatry there. They got a brain disorder. They've got a trauma in their background.
Yeah.
And when you find the idolatry, you shame them and hurt them with a technique that's really good in other places.
Interesting, because you're using a one-size-fits-all approach. Okay.
And so I have to realize I may not be competent to deal with major depressive disorder, and I'm not.
Sure.
But I have to realize I'm not good at that, so I need to work in team.
Okay.
And so I do that because I can bring in a spiritual context. I can bring in a grace context. I can bring in things that I'm good at. But I need to realize there's a lot of stuff I can't do, and I need to let people know I can help you with this piece, but you need somebody else to help with this piece.
So one of the antidotes to avoiding a one-size-fits-all strategy is a robust sense of self-awareness of your own limitations as a helper.
Big time.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're
And then listen to people's story honestly and say, is your problem an idolatry? If it is, I can be a real help to you. Now, that's not my particular formula, but I've got certain things I can do well, and as I listen to stories, okay, can I help with a piece of this? And I can be a real help even though I can't fix everything.
What have you learned over the years about how to be an effective listener?
Quit talking. Ask questions. Reflect back what they say. And just that's the place, creating something that when you're talking in here, you're not going to get shamed. You're not going to look down. I'm not going to roll my eyes. Oh my gosh, kind of stuff. I'm going to hear people's stories, care about them as persons, and recognizing they may stuff that's just nuts, but it's their story.
Yeah.
My thing is to hear their story and help them feel safe. And I don't have to fix them. In many cases, once they talk their own story, they realize, well, that's garbage.
Interesting.
I don't have to tell them it's garbage. They know it.
Yeah.
They just need a place where they can explore and say, I don't know, this doesn't work for me. Yeah, they're right. So let's think about it. And my thing is stop talking, stop preaching, stop fixing. I mean, listen well, and then bring skill to it that can explore how to go on from here. But that listening, when I first came to Western, somebody said you read Egan's Effective Helper. It's still a standard text on effective listening. It's like the 16th edition of it or something out now. But it's Egan, E-A-G-E-N, Effective Helper. It's super good. Learn how to listen effectively.
Yeah, stop talking, stop fixing, stop preaching. Those are all the qualities that make somebody feel like they're an effective pastor. And I can, like, those are a lot of where my gifts lie. And so hearing that advice, it feels so counterintuitive. And especially because, especially in the pastoral work, pastors are often seen as the people who have the answers.
Yep.
And
that's true.
Yes.
Many times we do.
Yes.
And I'm not downplaying the place of the teaching side, but that's not where you start.
Yeah.
So my paradigm, when I start doing stuff, once I make a personal connection with somebody, I don't do what I'm doing here. I can only ask questions.
Yeah.
Or I can only repeat back what you just said. I'm hearing you say, try to repeat back in my own words. I cannot give any, here's what I think.
Sure.
I can't tell a parallel story. I can't do any of those things.
Yes.
Only questions, only repeat back, is this what you're saying?
Wow. Okay, so we've talked about one of the principles of effective helping is avoiding a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter mentality.
Yep.
And that comes from having a healthy self-awareness of your own limitations.
And my own strengths.
And your own strengths. And leading with a lot of questions and reflective statements. Is there anything else down that pathway that you find to be especially helpful when working with somebody that you're trying to help?
What I'm listening for, I mean, there's a lot of things I'm listening for, but a big thing I'm listening for is what are you afraid of and where do you hurt? And what do you hope for is too vulnerable. That's harder to get to. But I find that people will talk about what they're afraid of and where they hurt if I create a safe space for them to talk.
Sure.
So that's my goal. Is I want to hear what are you afraid of and where do you hurt?
I see.
And that gives me a direction to conversation. And I do it effectively. I hack into people's lives really well. That's why I've got boxes of Kleenex. I buy it by the case at Costco.
I'm curious about how we're talking kind of about more of a one-on-one context, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on how the pastoral work ministers to a group or to a congregation. But before I go there, I want to ask a question about. So I come from a Pentecostal background, where
I'm a Baptist-costal.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And so sometimes the expectation within a Pentecostal background is if you pray hard enough, the Holy Spirit's going to show up and things are going to get fixed now.
And sometimes that happens.
And sometimes they do. And so I'm curious, in your experience and thinking and work, help us understand what kind of expectations we should hold when working with those deep, intractable addictions and setbacks and hurts that everybody carries with. What kinds of things should we be hoping for and expecting for when it comes to trying to get better?
Okay. One of the things, I don't assume anybody talking to me is a believer in Jesus. They may be church kids, they may be lifelong Christians, but I don't assume they have a personal relationship. I don't assume they have a regenerative experience with the Holy Spirit. I assess that. Now, a lot of people, I come to conclusion pretty quickly, you've got a living relation with Jesus, but I don't assume it.
Are there key markers that really are easy flags?
A lot of it is, can they talk about their own personal sin there's hope. Because people talk about what's wrong with somebody else, and they'll tell you their own solutions, if you will. Can they really deal in their own sin, their own shame? Because that's what Jesus is about, is bring my sin and shame and fear with hope that he'll care and help. And so that's my big thing, is somebody, will they able to come into a context of sin? And the other thing is, I often will ask people to pray. And my thing is, do they say a prayer or do they bring their heart to Abba? And that tells me a lot. Because a lot of people learn how to say prayers, and they say them effectively, but there's nothing coming out of their heart. And they may have very eloquent prayers, because if people are intelligent and thoughtful, they can learn how to say prayers that are, wow.
Sure.
But my thing is, are they saying a prayer, or are they speaking their heart to Abba?
Sure.
So those are things I listen for. And of course I listen to their story.
So once you don't assume anything about a person's spiritual background, what next?
So get them connected with Jesus. The next thing is that there are many places where there are bondages or traumas, bondages, they're intellectual lies that people believe. And when I listen for bondages, emotional bondages, demonic bondage, I listen for lies, deep intellectual commitments, or trauma in their life. Those can be healed quite effectively and often quickly by bringing truth and replacing the lie, by taking the bondage and breaking the emotional fear that's associated with the demonic connections or something like that. There can be places where with some bit of skill, I can bring great help to people in a very short period of time just by simply breaking the lie.
Yeah.
I just sat with somebody this week who the lie was because of an experience they'd gone through about 15 years ago, that they were disqualified from any kind of usefulness in the kingdom. And this is a seminary student. Now, why in the world they're in seminary and have that lie? I don't think they fully realized what was going on. But you're sitting here in this office, and I was doing my hack into thing kind of stuff. We found that lie, and I didn't know it. He told me, but he didn't realize he was saying it. I was listening really carefully. And when I discovered the lie, then I brought back the truth of Scripture to that lie, exposed it as a lie, and once he brought it out in the open, he realized it was a lie. And we then confessed it to Jesus, brought the rebuke against that lie, and then had him repeat and speak the truth that sin was forgiven.
Wow.
I mean, that was done, the whole experience took about an hour.
Wow.
Now, this is a recent story, so I don't know the outcome of that, but I've had many before that. Once you break a lie or break a demonic bondage or a trauma event, you can make major advance in a very short period of time. Sometimes that's for the power of the Holy Spirit. Sometimes it's just wise application of Scripture. So you can do really quick stuff. This is Neil Anderson's Steps to Freedom, by the way. And I have high respect for Neil's Step to Freedom. His Overcoming the Darkness book is just outstanding. Yeah. And a lot of good techniques in there, and his Steps to Freedom that come in various forms. So I know Neil personally, and then I've read a lot of his stuff, and I use it in my own way, of course. And then the step beyond that is just the long obedience in the same direction.
Sure.
Just
Eugene
become
Peterson.
And just the life change type stuff for the spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices that leave room in my life for God to work, whether that's fasting or prayer or celebration or feasting or something like that.
Absolutely.
And just bring that in for the long-term deep change.
Yeah. Okay.
So get saved.
Yeah.
Don't assume that's true.
Yeah.
Or that sometimes it's an experience of the Holy Spirit, and that's where the Pentecostal side is very real.
Sure.
The Holy Spirit wants to come and do an Acts 4 to you and just shake you and get you going, and then deal with the lies, the bondages, the traumas, the fears, and you can break those in short term and then come in for the long obedience in the same direction, which can be very frustrating because, why can't I deal with this?
Sure.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Baby steps.
What role do you see that the gospel plays in helping shape the life of a congregation around issues of mental health and the common things of depression and anxiety and stress and things like that?
Talk about it. I just did a thing at Reach Church up in Kirkland, Brian McCormick's ghost friend, and he's the senior guy there. And he, through a situation that happened in the church, realized we've got to steer into depression. He's a pastor. He didn't have a background in counseling at all, but in his church he does. So he knows that I work with this sort of stuff. So, Gary, can you come up and we'll spend 2 Sundays just talking about depression. Bring it out onto the table in front of the congregation. He did a thing just on fear, biblical view of fear. I don't remember which passage he preached. And then I came up the next day, next Sunday, and just did a biblical theology of depression. Where does it come from? How do you deal with it? And then did text in questions from the congregation, and then we did a Q&A following. And just those two services, that was 5 or 6 months ago, those two services opened up a conversation where people said, okay, I can talk about the fact that I'm depressed. And there were mental health professionals in the congregation. Funny thing, a psychiatric nurse practitioner was in the congregation. She had never heard that discipline ever mentioned publicly in a positive way in the church, ever. And as they were talking about the role of psychiatric nurse practitioner, do prescription for medications, the monitoring, that kind of stuff. And she was back there, yes! But nobody ever talked about it. Sure. She was a huge, very important kind of thing. And she'd never been mentioned publicly at all.
What an honorific. That's so
and
neat.
But see, things like that, there are resources in helping people get in contact with that. And it's not just pray the fear away. You may need some meds to deal with a mood stabilizer, and psychiatric nurse practitioner can do that for you. And they're actually, if they're believers, they're really genuine, cool people.
Yeah. So we're on the cusp of obviously a very deep kind of issue around the role of prescription psychiatrics inside the role of mental health, and and I'm curious. I mean, you've obviously just stated that sometimes the solution involves, not exclusive, but involves the right kinds of mood stabilizing drugs to be able to help on the biological, neurological level, help somebody attain a degree. Right. Is there anything else that you want to kind of say there? Because I mean,
well, my theology comes in here. My theology of personhood is basically we're created to be persons in the image of God. So first thing I say, a person, image of God. We're here to do God's work for him in concert with him. Then Adam is created, dust plus breath. So that's body plus spirit in interacting duality. I'll use some fancy terminology here.
Sure.
So I'm body and I'm spirit, and those two are interacting closely together. And if I have a trauma in my emotional life, it's going to affect my body. If I have something wrong in my body, it's going to affect my spirit.
Yes.
Then beyond that, we're very complicated persons, all kinds of emotions and mental things and such. And that's all the dimensions. So when I'm looking at somebody who's facing depression, for example, or anxiety or common kinds of things like that, I'm assuming there's likely to be something on the physical side as well as something on the emotional, spiritual side.
Sure.
So I'm going to explore what's your concept of God. I'm going to have them draw a picture of what God looks like at 2 o'clock in the morning when you wake up and your mind is racing. I'm going to have them think about what are the practices they're doing. But on the body side, I'm going to say, tell me about your exercise program. How do you sleep at night? What you're eating? And part of that is I can't do it, but I'm going to have them go see a doctor, have a physical. What do your hormones look like? If you do a complete blood count, what does it look like?
Sure.
And a part of that is assessing your hormonal kinds of things, which can involve antidepressants, mood stabilizers, and that's where you need somebody who's really skilled, like a psychiatric nurse practitioner who can help you assess those things. May not be physical, but the idea that I don't want to take any drugs. Well, that's like saying, okay, I've got diabetes. I don't want to take any drugs because that's bad for you. I'll just pray that the diabetes will go away. That's idiocy. We'd all agree. But somehow on the emotional side, we just don't believe that a biological imbalance in my body, somehow we think, and I thought this for years.
Sure. It seemed to be
I just need to pray and trust God more. And I remember a night in seminary, I was doing my all-nighters kind of thing, putting together papers and such, and about 4 o'clock in the morning, I've been working all night, my stomach was afire with acid reflux. Just fire, and I'm praying and all that kind of stuff. And for me to get out of my chair, go down to the 7 and buy some Tums and eat a Tums, I can't tell you how difficult that was.
Interesting.
Because I just
you felt as though if my faith was stronger, if I prayed harder, then God would solve this for me.
Yeah. And I mean, that sounds so ridiculous now, but that was the theology I had at that point, is I just need to trust God. And for me to go get a Tums was, I mean, sure helped me finish the paper.
Sure.
But that was violating my trust of God. Now, I look back at that and I say, I was fed bad theology, and I was.
So am I hearing you say that, like, if we have a, if you will, like a holistic view of the incarnation,
Right.
that God has built us, designed us as both spirit and body,
Yep.
and the two interlap and overplay with each
Yep.
other, that problems manifested in the one can have roots in the other,
Yep.
and that solutions in the one will have, and vice versa.
Yeah.
What do you think is, maybe the question is, there's a challenge there in, well, I mean, thank God for modern medicine. We're living in 2019, and thank God we're not living in 1019, and so we have access to all these different kinds of things that will help us. Do you ever wonder that we're more dependent upon those fixes, that it lessens our strength and faith? How do we hold that tension between the both and in this context?
The problem in the medical field is it's totally biological. Everything is a physical problem.
Yes.
So you shock it, cut it, or drug it. And while I say, yes, those are really true, the picture of the free will, the beliefs in the system, those kinds of things are equally important. So a lot of medical people now are medically coming to the conclusion there is no such thing as free will, because you're biologically determined by your genes and your epigenetics and that sort of thing. And with the rise of brain science that's happened over the past decade or so, we're explaining more and more stuff in terms of the way your brain is happening, and the programming and neural pathways and all that kind of stuff. And I completely support that kind of research, but the tendency is it's all about your brain and nothing about your mind.
Yeah.
And I think, no, your mind is critically important.
Yeah.
Your base structures affect everything, the intellectual structures, spiritual structures, and it's between the two. You could be overly dependent on medications and think it's going to solve everything, or you can, I think, trust medications. And so I try to pray. If the problem is biological and you've got an effective medication, then I think I should use the medication. Now, there's a lot we don't know in that spot, but there's a lot we don't know on the spiritual side as well.
Any other words of wisdom that you would give pastors or aspiring pastors when it comes to being both faithful proclaimers of the gospel and also helping acknowledge and validate the mental health issues that are present in a congregation?
There are a number of things that are good, I mean really good, in just basic health of things. But a book that I found helpful, this little thing, Stephen, how do you pronounce that name?
Oh, you've got me there.
Yeah, Grevich.
GRC.
GRCEIVH. It's just mental health in the church.
All right.
It's a little book from Zondervan, and it's a ministry handbook for including children and adults with ADHD, anxiety, mood disorders, other common mental health conditions, and it's written for pastors.
Ah, okay.
It's written, I mean, the guy's an MD, he's a psychiatrist. He knows what he's talking about. But this little book in 180 pages has just, it's so much basic stuff. And if I could get pastors to read this one little thin book, you don't have to read, all the professional stuff about, all the different psychiatric kinds of things. But this little book will give you a great introduction and give you the vocabulary for talking with the mental health professionals and not being a total idiot in things. Okay. Now, that will not make you a counselor. It will not certainly make you a psychiatrist.
Sure.
But just getting what are some of the different mood disorders, what are some of the different personality disorders, and so when you can talk about stuff, and I can't diagnose stuff. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I think we're probably dealing with a true narcissist here. I've done with that. But I can't diagnose that. But I got friends who can.
Sure.
But just being able to coordinate with mental health professionals, this is really helpful for me.
I see. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about the limits of our understanding. I was actually watching in preparation for this a talk that you gave at a West Side of Jesus church some years ago about the role of demonic oppression.
Yeah.
And I forget exactly what question was asked, maybe it was, why does God allow Satan to oppress people or something like that? But your answer, and forgive me if it wasn't that question because I don't want to misinterpret how you responded there. But what I was so impressed by was you stood there in front of this group of people as the expert brought in to do expert things and teach. And obviously you come from
PhD,
a lifetime.
chairman of Department of Theology, all that kind of stuff.
So if you and your answer was, we don't know.
Exactly.
And I was so struck by that simple, powerful statement. To admit that and state it baldly,
right?
And so unpack that a little bit for us. How do you walk the tension between working very hard to have the answers, while also being very quick to say we don't know? And what's the importance of humility in this process?
One is we don't know because God hasn't told us.
Okay.
Scripture has a lot of information in it, a lot of wisdom in it. It doesn't answer all the questions. One of the verses, Deuteronomy 29:29, the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and our children forever. So the things he has revealed, I'm giving my absolute best understanding in a community of faith. But there are things God hadn't told me. God knows what I'm going to have for supper tonight. I don't. How does God know what I'm going to have for supper tonight? He's not told me how he does that. Huge theological debates. The only way he can know it's determined. Therefore, God has determined all things, and Calvinism is right. No. It's free will. God doesn't know because it's free, and all that. Yes. The answer is we don't know how God knows that. So let's say we don't know because God hasn't told us. Now, I think that's gross negligence on God's part, to be sure. I think that's gross negligence. God, get down here right now. And, I mean, I'm being sarcastic.
Yes.
But I'm not happy that God... But the other thing is, I'm a leader in my church. I'm a leader here at the seminary. I look at a complex question. There are 123 different factors that come into that question.
Sure.
Somebody comes in and knows 3 of those factors and says, it's just so simple. Why don't you do this? And I can't even begin to talk to him.
Right.
Because trying to bring him up to speed of all the factors involved in this, my thing is, little boy, you're not man enough to talk about that yet. Now, I never say that.
Of course.
But it's in my head.
Yes.
Which is probably sin.
I've heard it said that for every complex problem, there's a solution that's simple and obvious and wrong.
Yep. Yeah. And so I just recognize that there's a lot of things that God, I just can't do it. So at that point, I just have to trust God. That's hard for me to do. I'm not a trusting person in those kind of things. So that's we don't know because God hasn't told us or because science hasn't gotten there yet. There's I don't know. The answer's there, but I don't know it. And sometimes it's beyond my capabilities. Other times I just haven't had time to explore it. It was really hard for me to come to a spot of I don't know because I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. I've got to know everything. And coming to that spot where I could say without embarrassment, I don't know. It's not saying I'll never know, but as I sit here today, I don't know.
Sure.
This I know. This I'm not sure about. This I don't know. That's just honest assessment. There's nothing shameful about I don't know. Well, sometimes there is because it's just negligence and you just haven't, you're just too lazy to go look it up. So there's we don't know because God hasn't told us, science hasn't gotten there. There's I don't know because I haven't investigated it yet. And then there's I think, but there's probably more than I'm aware of. So I'm famous for saying, yep, I got an opinion on everything, and occasionally I'm right.
Sure.
Which is, I think I'm right. And then there's other places where, no, I'm confident this is right.
I find
so
that
there's a spectrum there.
In so many intellectual exercises, the more you know, the more you end up realizing you don't know.
Well, here's the thing. I found a diagram for that. When I start out, my circle of knowing is like this.
Yes.
So the boundary is there's not a lot of things I don't know. Okay, I learn a lot. Now I know this much. I know a lot, but my circle of unknowing is also much bigger.
Yes.
So the more I know, the bigger my circle of unknowing is. And you do know a lot more. You know a lot more, but you also know there's a lot of more that you don't know. So my confidence in what I do know needs to be stronger, but my realization there's a lot I don't know should also grow.
I'm curious to hear. I'm going to state something. I'm curious to see
Go
if
for
you
it.
would agree with it or not. That zeal and youth tend to be aligned, and
Yeah.
that old age or seasonedness, with it comes a sense of temperance. And I'm wondering if, in your own experience, having served in this institution faithfully for 40 years, one of my great fears is I come busting out of the gates with all of this youth and energy, and I'm writing. I read a couple of books on it, and then I'll later look back on myself and think, oh, what a fool.
Yeah.
I was overconfident in my positions. I was understudied in the people who didn't agree with me, and now I think I'll settle into something that's a little bit more humble, a little bit more open-handed. Is that a process that you've seen before?
Yes. And I just sat with a guy yesterday, super student, young guy, and he's graduated from seminary now. He's up and coming, brilliant. He's looking at possibly planning a church, and he's like 27 years old, full of zeal, all that kind of stuff. And he said, Gary, if you gave me a couple of things of advice, what would you do? My number one thing is, if you're thinking of him as a church planner, I said, get 2 or 3 guys that are a whole generation older who will sit with you and say, slow down.
Yeah.
Or go. Because you'll bring zeal, you'll bring idealism, you'll bring energy that somebody who's 30 years older may not have. You'll bring a courage, maybe foolhardy. And that's huge. It's important. But get somebody who's older who can say, let's just let that sit for a little bit. And that balance between the two, my young friend is going to push the old guy to get off his butt and go on with it. But the old guy might say, let's wait and make sure we know what we're talking about before we get up and speak.
Not everything all at once.
Yeah.
I see.
And so I think that's a good thing, is just get some, and that's why multi-generational is so important.
Sure.
Now, I'm an old guy now, so I need some young guys to kick me and say, get on with it. Actually, I don't, because I'm still a pusher and a driver. But there's a wisdom of age that needs to be balanced with an energy of youth. Yeah. So my lead pastor is the same age as my kids, and Jay is outstanding. Well, he's almost 50 now. He needs some 25-year-olds to push him, and he knows that. So I'm the old guy. He's the middle-aged guy, which would be a little hard for him to admit, but it's true. But we need some young guys, and that intergenerational thing is really, really important.
Absolutely. Okay, a couple of thoughts here as we close. You, for many years, and me for a little bit, have dealt with Bible school students, some of whom come in without a lot of the software package that says we'll be a success in a scholastic environment. And so they struggle. They struggle with, it's so much reading, it's so much writing. Sitting here in your office surrounded by 1,000 volumes.
My true addiction, books.
I know. My wife said, I'm not that bad after all when she saw you. So I'm really thankful.
I've been doing a lot longer than you have.
You're running air cover for me. When I'm just interested in, you have dedicated so much of your life and so much of your discretionary time to investing in understanding the thoughts of people who have gone before. Give us a little sense for the kind of discipline that's developed in your world to be able to achieve that. Not everyone gets to be a PhD. Not everyone gets to. And so tell us a little bit about the disciplines that's developed there, and what recommendation would you give to the up-and-coming student to keep going and not falter in the face of all the work that's in front of us?
Yeah, there's just so much to read and master. Give it up. But there are 2 things I do. First of all is I read giants with whom I disagree. I don't read the secondary material. I learned this way early on. Go to the master. So just use an example, Thomas Aquinas. He represents a different camp. I'm not Catholic. I'm not Aristotelian in my way of doing things as he is. I don't do my logical thought structures the way he does. But instead of reading somebody who will tell me about Thomas Aquinas, go pick up some of his stuff and go to work. You're saying, man, this is hard to figure out. Go to the master. And that's on my own team as well. So when I do a lot of stuff with different positions on such. So I'm kind of famous for being a Calminian.
Sure.
But when I go to the Calvinist side, which I used to be, so I'm a convert, so I'm more hostile toward the Calvinist side, I want to go to the absolute best. I don't want to go to second rate. I don't want to go to a caricature. So I go to the absolute best. So I go to a John Piper.
Sure.
Staunch 7-point Calvinist.
Yes, very much.
John's a personal friend. We're not close. We don't know together that much. But I have highest respect for John.
Certainly, yeah.
And profoundly disagree with him on his way of putting things together.
Sure.
Go to the best.
Yeah.
Don't waste your time on caricatures. And read the secondary material. Use that maybe as an introduction to the master, but go to the master. It's harder work. It'll take more investment, but it's really, really helpful to do.
The question that's being begged there is, how does a young person, without the kind of context that comes from years within the discipline, how would they begin to understand even where to start in that endeavor?
Go to somebody who's been around a little bit and say, who's the best?
I see.
And then what I would do, say if you're in a typical Pentecostal church, for example, you're probably not representing the staunch cessationist Calvinists. So go to your charismatic pastor and say, who's the best Calvinist pastor around? And go to the most biblical Calvinist you can say and say, who's the master? Who's your best guy ever?
Yeah.
Firsthand as much as possible.
Okay.
And then say, who do you respect most? And let's say John Frame. Okay, he writes books like this.
Yes.
Hey. Okay. Well, learn how to read a book well.
Oh, okay. And that's that you say that, but there's a lot that's underneath that statement
correct.
because it's becoming a lost art.
Yep.
So 60 seconds on
Mortimer Adler.
Okay. How to read a book for all it's worth. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I read that way back when. You never, ever begin at page 1 of a book. Ever. You have to learn how to read a book well. And especially in a fat book, John Frame. You can read it well. And he tells you how to do it. So I go to the Amazon review and read that. It gives me a picture of what this book is about. I don't take it as authoritative, but that's the outline. And then I start reading. I usually start reading the conclusions because he's summarizing, here's what I've said in the past 70 pages. So I read the 3-page summary, his own 3-page summary, then go back and fill in details. But again, read Adler, How to Read a Book. It's just great. Read intelligently. It's just a skill you have to learn. Yeah. And then learn how to write well.
Ooh,
write good essays.
Yeah.
So
and those two disciplines are interrelated.
They're
The
very
more
much interrelated.
the more you read, the better writer you become.
Go to the master, learn how to read well. These days we've got a lot of videos. So if you're reading John Barclay's Paul and the Gift, masterpiece. You can go to YouTube and find a 1-hour lecture where John Barclay summarizes his own view. Go watch the video.
Look at that. Yeah.
Firsthand is best. And then later, read the critiques that come from a different perspective, but always start with the master, read to understand what's going on. Okay. That way you get a good picture of what's going on instead of being locked into your echo chamber.
Sure. Yeah.
That's just been super helpful for me. Go firsthand, read for understanding, try to think, okay, what is going on here? Look for things we agree on before you look for things you disagree on.
Beautiful.
Those have been helpful for me.
All right. Any final thoughts, words of wisdom for us?
Pray a lot. Hang out with different people. Seriously, hang out with people from different tribes, different ethnicities, different cultures, different nationalities. It's amazing how my own background will distort things. And it can be broken down simply by talking to somebody who's a Pentecostal from Nigeria or something. Oh my gosh, you think that? Like, help me. Those are fun conversations.
Yes.
You get some good food, too.
Yes. Awesome. Dr. Breshears, thank you so much for lending your wisdom to us and walking through us all. So I appreciate it a lot. God bless.